Welcome, everybody, to episode 19 of the Community Cloudcast. My name is Eric Shupps. I'm joined by my fellow co-host, Mr. Jason Himmelstein.
Hello.
And Mr. Paul McCollum.
Hello.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. And we are joined this month by our very special guest, the one and only Liz Sundet, coming to us from the frozen climes of the Upper Peninsula.
Yes.
Which isn't so frozen at the moment, but...
Still colder than it is where you are, yes.
You got that right. So thank you all for joining us for another installment. So a quick trip through the usual housekeeping, and then we'll jump right into our content. Be sure to join us every month on or about the third Thursday of the month when our episodes go live. You can catch our back episodes, of course, on our YouTube channel and on our Facebook events. You can always go to communitycloudcast.com and see a listing of all the previous events as well. As I mentioned, our special guest this month is Liz Sundet of Microsoft. Liz, quick bio. How did you were one of those creatures that was an MVP before you sold out to the dark side, went to Microsoft, just like some other person on this webcast.
I resemble that remark.
I do indeed. So, Liz, how did you get into this silly business?
Yes, Eric reminds me every single time he sees me that, I was once an MVP. Now I'm no longer. So, but yeah, I joined Microsoft about 4.5 years ago. Wow, time flies. And joined as a PFE, or Premier Field Engineer in the field. And then about 2 years ago, I moved over to the product group and have been working with a Microsoft Viva, both with Viva Connections, Viva Amplify now, ever since that time. So I've been really enjoying my time with that, and I get to work with customers every single day. So I like to bring that perspective in. And yes, Jason's got Viva beer, I believe, correct?
That is correct. A San Antonio product. I'm very proud of my Viva beer, just in case anybody's looking for it. It's locally brewed here at the San Antonio Brewery. Was around before Viva the product. So, this is the Viva that I do.
Well,
yes.
Now we have to hit
It's closed, but
Not Duff beer, it's Viva beer.
Correct.
Yeah, Jason.
So is that the next feature shipping, Liz? Viva Intoxicate?
No. Viva alcohol, Viva beverages, no.
Well, we are very happy to have you this month, Liz. Thank you for taking time out to join us. Want to, as usual, thank our sponsors, Aptigent, for making this webcast possible. Big update just shipped for Salesforce on the Power Tools side. So if you're a Salesforce user, be sure and check that out. And speaking of Salesforce, we have yet to hear from Mr. Salesforce himself, Mr. McCollum. How are you, sir?
Doing well. No products to plug like Jason, but otherwise doing good.
No paid placements.
Yeah.
Or unpaid, as the case may be.
I'm trying to get a sponsorship, Eric.
Love it. Keep working it, brother. Keep working.
I'm trying.
All right. Well, for this month's episode, we thought we'd pick a topic that was near and dear to Liz's heart. Actually, a little bit removed from my day-to-day engagement. So this should be an interesting topic to explore. Obviously, we've all worked in and around the products long enough that we have a feeling for it from a Microsoft perspective, but also like to open it up for the wider discussion as we do here on the Cloudcast for other technologies as well. So why don't we start off from the top, really, with Liz, give us the Microsoft vision for what this means. Viva was a big announcement when it came out a few years ago. There's obviously been a lot of work within that space. It's a huge area of focus for the product team and especially for Jeff's slice of that overall product team. So what's the vision here? What is Microsoft trying to do in the marketplace that's different from what they've done in the past?
Yeah, and this is coming from an engineer, not a marketing person, so it might be a little bit of a different spin. But in how I view employee engagement is that, and the reason why we have a lot of the Viva modules is that when we looked out into the world, and especially when things started happening with the pandemic, there's a lot of customers, a lot of people at our customers that were being missed out on a day-to-day basis. Whether that was a frontline employee that had never ever used any kind of company intranet, or hey, there's some things that are missing from our technology that we do on a daily basis. And so the whole employee experience is putting those employees back kind of at the center of that model, rather than having it be an IT-led initiative. Just because we're working on technology doesn't mean that our employees shouldn't have a voice out there. And so really capturing what those employees really needed in their day-to-day work, and then bringing that to them right from where they are working, typically, which is Microsoft Teams. And so making it a very easy to get to, in terms of how to use the technology, where to find it, being able to connect with different people in your organization, whether those people are actually at your same working environment, the same location, or if they maybe are working from home or a different location. So being able to connect all of those different people together and bring those new audiences. So that's really how I view it, and that's my little kind of pitch for the employee experience overall.
And let's be clear here: we're not talking about yet another intranet, right? Viva and the employee engagement piece there. This is not what we consider in classic terms of an intranet. This is a different type of engagement model.
Yeah, and that's a great point, is that, all of the Viva experiences are really built on the technology that we've been using for years, whether that's SharePoint, whether that's Outlook, in cases Yammer, Teams. All of those technologies haven't changed. We've just applied them in a little bit of a different way. And I do remember, years and years and years ago, it was probably 5 years ago at one of the Ignites, talking with a couple of people from the Teams team, and they're like, hey, wouldn't it be awesome if we brought your company intranet into Teams? And I went, well, that's not possible, simply because, we've got a limitation of how many people can be in a team. And that's really not, why we have Teams. And now it is possible. So, I was proven wrong. I hate to be wrong, but yes, I've been proven wrong. We now have our things like our intranet in Teams that we can get to, quickly and easy. We have, things like Yammer that we've gone to a separate web browser experience before. We now have that in Teams. So being able to connect all of those different places together and being able to use them.
It looks like we lost Fearless Leader here for a minute.
That's okay.
So, hey, there he is.
I'm back. Sorry about that.
I was just saying it looked like we lost Fearless Leader there for a minute, so
Do we have a fearless leader?
Well, you were asking the questions, so.
At least the narrator. Yeah.
So I'm sure that was a great answer. I didn't hear any of it, but I'm sure it was a fantastic answer to the question.
You don't need another intranet. You can just use your same intranet and now get to it in Teams. How's that? That's the quick answer.
So how do you help customers figure out which pieces of this they need to put together? Because really, I look at Viva as there's a set of Legos, right? You get this sort of base set with SharePoint and Teams and whatnot. And then Viva are some extra sort of these pre-built ones that you can add on. But it's up to the customer to decide how best to implement that and which components they need. So how do you help guide them through that process?
Yeah, so great question. There's a couple of items, some of those experiences that are free. They're included within the Microsoft 365 products already. So things that you can do in terms of, bringing your intranet in Teams, that's what we call, Viva Connections. And that was, one of the most free across the board. So it's literally, creating that app in Teams that brings you your intranet resources, and then also an ability to be able to connect to other places like Viva Insights, Viva Learning. There's some free parts of those products. Viva Engage is another, free product. And then there's paid for products, or those premium products, which are Viva Goals, Viva Pulse, Viva Amplify, Viva Topics, other types of products. And then there's other products that are, geared specifically towards a user set, like Viva Sales. So all of those, bringing them together depending on what you need within your environment and how you're using that. But what I like to do with customers is I like to start out and say, hey, look to Viva Connections first in terms of deployment. I am biased here in that regard because I've been working with that product for a while. But in terms of, hey, this is going to give you a lot of bang for $0, right from the beginning. And then it also ties into a lot of those other products nicely. And so getting into Viva Insights, getting into Viva Engage, getting into Viva Learning, all of those have free products as well. And those all have connection points right from Viva Connections. So Viva Connections is that main landing page, or that main landing spot for people to go to, and then being able to connect to some of those other areas depending on what their licenses are.
And I understand there's a new or relatively new announcement to that product set. There's something Viva Home. Is that what it's called?
Yeah. So the Viva Home experience is something that we have built on top of the Viva Connections. And it was for those set of customers that, maybe didn't have an intranet. And knowing that it takes a good deal of time and effort and, money and all those types of resources to be able to develop a home site, a corporate intranet, if you will. Many of those customers had, their intranet that wasn't on a modern experience, wasn't on that SharePoint communication site. Maybe it was on a, SharePoint on-prem. Maybe it was on, something that was outside of Microsoft technologies, but still wanted to take advantage of being able to use some of the Viva experiences. We've now brought this Viva Home into play, and that started rolling out today to targeted release customers. So soon in the future, you'll be able to see that Viva Home experience, and then be able to use that to tie to some of the other experiences, while still bringing things like your dashboard for productivity, as well as your news feed, all of those global resources right to the front and center that you would normally have in that browser experience. But if you do also have a wonderfully developed corporate intranet that was ready for Viva Home, you could either bypass the new home experience, or you could connect to it directly from that new home experience just with one click. So pretty easy all the way around, and it brings all of those same ingredients right to the forefront.
So how does that work with, let's say, bringing in Jason's perspective here, you've got a data-driven organization, right? You're doing a lot of Power BI, and you've got dashboards and KPIs and whatnot that's really driving a lot of the decisioning and whatnot inside your organization. How do you effectively blend that with things like a news feed, with topics and things that are sort of activity driven into an experience that isn't just overwhelming for the user?
Yeah, we've got analytics, page analytics, and Jason maybe wants to chime in here too on how to use some of those page analytics and bring them into Power BI. I'm sure he's got lots and lots of tips and tricks for you there, but a lot of that is analytics driven, and being able to engage with those audiences by looking at what those analytics are is a great way to kind of re-establish your engagement model.
Do we run the risk here of over personalizing the data that we're delivering to our user segments. There's something to be said, I think, for a general company square, if you will, the traditional intranet homepage kind of experience where people come and they get generic news that affects everybody rather than things that are just specific to their job, and see things that are, maybe affirming overall, like accomplishments and milestones, birthdays, or company events and whatnot. Are we going maybe too far down this personalized data path?
I don't think so. One of the things that I like about kind of this new model of personalizations is that you could still have targeted communications that were for all company. And then also I could also see, hey, but there's things that I want to know about based on my location, based on my role, that I don't really want to, see what everybody else is seeing sometimes. And this was true even before I joined Microsoft, but even more now that I've joined Microsoft, in that, hey, I don't want to see all of the announcements for different types of happenings that are going on in Redmond. I'm not located in Redmond. So what's my local office doing? Those types of things that, are targeted a little bit to me and makes me feel like I'm part of that, and that, my views and what I'm interested in are important to the company as well. So I would say, that there's also the whole, hey, there's some information that is targeted to everyone in the company, and it can still be targeted to everybody in the company because everybody needs to know about it. But having some of those localized types of things, I think is really nice for me to be able to feel like I'm part of more of the local communities involved as well.
I'm still stuck on the term over personalized.
Yeah.
Is there such
That's a new one.
What kinds of things, Eric, were you thinking, like losing the perspective of the overall company, and being able to tune out things?
Jason?
I want to give an example. So if I go into Viva Connections right now, highlights for you, fourth one down is a video called Fat Bias.
Oh.
It's a little too personal, okay? It's a little too personal now. Just saying.
That might be for all company though.
That Dell Val get better and better, ain't it?
Yeah.
Just
When
saying.
you have too many cookies.
Let me go back to drinking my Viva beer now.
So,
Nate
Paul,
agrees.
let's think back to when we all got excited about audiences for web parts, right? And every homepage was full of 1,000 web parts, all targeted at different audiences. Okay, leaving behind the performance nightmare and the poor, infrastructure implementation that was. Everybody wanted to have this sort of different experience when they hit the homepage, but the overall larger themes and messages got lost when we did that, to the point that everyone would go to the homepage and see something different, and you didn't know what was going on in the broader company. You didn't know what was going on in it. Maybe an important division had a big win or something that could impact you, but you never know it because everything was so dialed in and targeted. And then when we started this whole, remember when the user profile page became Delve, and suddenly you had this stream of stuff that was, I don't want to know what the spreadsheet Jason was working on 3 days ago. I don't care. Just because we're on the same team doesn't mean I care about that. So I'm wondering if we're creating too many of those individual connections here, when the broader picture, it can be just as important.
Gotcha. Yeah, there was also the concept of the filter bubble, where you only got information that you were looking to get on there too. Yeah, so I get you. That's definitely a balance. I think it just meant people had to architect better, and you had to architect your targeting and make sure you were able to do it. The audiences thing almost went past what we could you could target people too closely, but not have a good picture of what all you were delivering. You couldn't see that. Yeah, that inability to preview and never see what people were seeing. You had to have those individual metrics that were never quite dialed in to where you could tell what people had consumed. So is Viva carrying that forward? Is there dialable and A/B metrics and stuff like that, or?
Not quite yet. And I think it's important to also remember that we do have a new set of kind of those owners, if you will, of some of the corporate intranets, and especially with talking about connections, and then some other products like Amplify as well, as we've got these IT people who have traditionally, owned a lot of that information, but guess what? They're not the main players anymore. We have to involve people that are coming from, the corporate communications, the HR, the marketing types of roles as well, because they know and hopefully understand those end users a little bit more and can be able to target some of those communications a little bit differently than we have done in the past. And so new opportunities are there for those types of roles to work alongside with IT in terms of, making sure that those communications are going out to the appropriate audiences at the right times. But I've said it before, and I've said it many times over. IT should not own, kind of that corporate communications platform that is bringing your intranet.
Yeah, too true, Jason. I know that all this engagement stuff is creating a ton of signals and a ton of data. How are customers parsing through that data and actually surfing that for actionable metrics?
Well, honestly, a lot of it's very new, right? So there's not as much that we're doing yet. There's the new concept of Graph Data Connect that's pulling those graph signals that over and dumping them into Synapse that we're now putting Power BI on top of to do reporting. But truly, it's it's very new, right? So Viva's been around a very short time, dumping data into Graph and things like that. So Graph Data Connect was a big announcement that got made not too long ago. Jeremy Thake was on with Jeremy in the Garage Studios and did a good job explaining what you're doing there. But it's rather new. So personally, I'm not seeing a whole lot of it being done yet because it's a lot of hey, let's get the Viva adoption there, and then we can really start to see what people are leveraging, what people are doing. Let's get the uptick there first before we worry about whether or not how we drill down into each of the individualized metrics to be able to get there. So a lot of it is take the data out of Graph, store it in an immutable storage like Custo, and be able to get back to that data at a later date. A lot of folks right now, I was talking with folks on Jeremy's team just today who are working with our customers to go ahead and get that type of thing set up because they're pulling that data out of the Graph and want to be able to visualize it. But the visualization piece comes later. It's how do we get things stood up and really get in a state of information first so that we can know. Because, hey, it's great to take a look at what's happening right now. But what happens 3 months, 6 months, a year down the line, that's really what matters, right? It's not the instant engagement. You can get that from page metrics, right? It's the longer term. So with Viva, being a relatively new uptick in the market space, people really aren't doing as much around the analytics side of it yet, in my experience. But taking that data, storing it off so that we can come back to it later, and be able to say, hey, when we did a campaign last year, how did that look? What do we need to do? That's something that you take a look at more down the line. You get some information out there first.
So that raises the obvious question, Liz. Are customers talking about how to measure the success? Because this is, it's not I wouldn't say it's a massive investment like it would be if we were going to release, Power BI greater privileges to 100,000 people in the company, right? But it is nonetheless, it's an add-on expense and could be significant. How are they measuring the success of that?
Yeah, we're just starting to do some private previews on some of the analytics that we have coming, additional analytics other than just the page analytics and that type of stuff. But customers want to measure, hey, I created a news post. How engaged was my audience for that news post? Did I target the right people, or was the news post the right thing? Did it get more engagement in some place like Viva Engage or Yammer than it did on the SharePoint, pages that we have? Where are people coming at this information? Are they accessing it from a browser, or are they on their mobile device looking at these types of things? So all of that data is pieces that we are collecting to be able to bring those to those customers that are creating that source of information and being able to analyze that for additional pieces of information to be created after that as well.
So I have a question. So whenever we tried to do the same thing with SharePoint, and we tried to get intranets going and communicate to people, we gave everybody this arsenal of information. The thing that seemed like it was missing, and this is a little bit of an aside, was training on how to engage audiences and how to speak people's language as opposed to just broadcast corporate message to all of the Initech employees. Is there more intelligence built in to help? Hey, these kind of articles have been more well received, and you can kind of teach people through the data at all? Or is it still you have to kind of bring your UX focused content creators that understand consumption better to actually be successful?
I think it's a little bit of both. I don't think the technology has changed in terms of capturing what the audience wants to hear better. I think that we need to bring, some of those content creators that know how to write that compelling and engaging story, but then have some governance around how often do we change? How often do we post new news? What is that news that we are posting that is going to, be the most capturing for our audiences? Where are we posting that? Is that just a news post, or are we using Viva Engage as well, or Yammer as well in our organizations, so that we can get a couple of different audiences and really analyzing that and making tweaks along the way to be able to make those more successful in the long run.
So let's take a step outside of the Microsoft bubble here for a minute, Paul. This is obviously a big topic of conversation inside of the Microsoft space, but is this a problem that the rest of the world is seeing? I know it's a little bit removed from what you do, but is employee engagement something they're worried about, say in the Salesforce space or in other areas where you're engaging that maybe we're not seeing?
It is, but it's an aside. There's the social pieces are very much directly tied to return on investment, and when you're actually working with your customers, and when those lead to sales or interactions that drive profit. So, being in SharePoint and intranets for a long time, really your only metric was hits or downloads or views, if you had the right metrics in place to capture that kind of stuff. Have a much more direct, impact driven, data driven, dollar driven on when those things come into play and how you're getting there. So yeah, not as much. I still miss that dark art of trying to figure out what's good for people. What will engage, what content will engage people, as opposed to stuff that's a little less mysterious and elegant of what drives clicks and what gets done and what finishes workflows.
Interesting. So let's look forward a little bit. Liz, we're currently in the sort of release features as fast as we can phase for this new widget. At some point, right, we have to coalesce around some best practices, and this has to be bundled to some degree to get people to easily deploy, because it's not that easy to deploy right now. Let's be honest; it's a lot of different moving parts. So how are they steering that ship to looking forward, saying, okay, now we're going to make Viva really easy to deploy for the organization?
I wish I had a good answer for this. I don't have a good answer for this. I know, that there's some licensing implications in terms of some of those premium products. And then each of those individual pieces and parts that are part of what makes up the employee engagement, all of those Viva modules are still those individual pieces. Are there improvements that are coming along the way? Yes, in some of those individual cases. For instance, Viva Connections, love to have that, already pre-pinned and, be able to configure that a little bit easier from an administrative level. But those types of things don't exist right now. Have we made it easier over time, considering that, a couple of years ago I had to use PowerShell? Yeah, I think we've made it easier. But is it, 100% foolproof? Anybody can do it? Not quite there yet. So there's still some of those same considerations that we've been met with, anytime that we've deployed technology.
So obviously both of you are engaging with this on a regular basis. And when I say both of you, I mean you and Jason, inside of Microsoft. So you're sort of dogfooding it, as it were, having to deal with it all the time. Are there things that you catch yourself saying, gee, I really wish it did this, or gee, I really wish it did that?
Or didn't.
Or didn't, yeah. I really wish it wouldn't do that.
Yes, all the time. And that's what makes my job so great, is because I have that direct access. Even though I'm not a feature PM, I work with customers. And so I get to talk with customers all the time. And they have some great ideas. But yeah, I have my own ideas as well. And I can go back to those feature PMs and those product teams and say, hey, you know what? Here's what I'm hearing for customers. And oh boy, yes, my bias is showing through, because I really wish it did these types of things as well. But then there's also the flip side of that. One of the big things that when I first got Viva Connections on my mobile device, one of the first cards that was shown on my mobile device was, you're in building 34. Check out what the cafe in building 34 has for lunch today. Yep. I'm nowhere near building 34.
Helpful 1,000 miles away.
Because I'm connected to that office, it said, this is what we're having for lunch today. And I happened to click on it, and it said, yeah, you don't actually have any cafes anywhere near you. So that card was it was pointless for me. Wait a minute, why can't I remove that card? Why can't I get rid of it? Because it's not needed for me. So it's those types of things too, that, hey, I wish I could do this because of this being, not such a great experience for me. So all of those types of things come into play when I'm talking with those different product groups and feature PMs on these types of things.
And do you see this sort of connected series of components as we go forward being more team-centric, meaning that they're point in time where things are happening, or SharePoint-centric, where it's really a consume at your leisure type of approach? Which way are they kind of driving?
I really think that depends on what we are specifically talking about, because some of those could be very much Teams, and I mean Teams as in that little T type of bracket there, where hey, we're gathering a piece of information from you, and you're corresponding with a survey or something of that sort, and gathering that really quick type of feedback. But then other types of products are more centric to, that collaboration experience that may take a little bit longer to collect all of the information, might take, different sets of users in terms of people to write different, people to think about how they're wanting to engage an audience, how they're wanting to push out communications, all of those types of things. So I think it really just depends on which specific product that we're talking about here. Connections, Amplify, those types of things might be more of the, SharePoint centric types of models. But Viva Pulse might be something that, hey, we're doing, intrinsically within our own team type of thing.
What's the easiest starting point for the average customer? You may have alluded to this before when you talked about Viva Connections, but there's obviously a whole lot of stuff going on here. So where I'm new, I want to jump into it, where do I start?
And I think that also depends, the famous answer that it depends. But I think that also depends in terms of where your customer's at in their journey. So Viva Connections could be really easy, especially given the new home experience that we're bringing. So don't have to necessarily have, the 18 months or 2 years or whatever it was to develop your home site on your corporate intranet, or even if your corporate intranet's not in SharePoint, to bring all of that pieces of information over. But it really just depends on, where are the customers at in their journey, because there's so many different customers that, hey, they might have, put a lot of time and resources and effort into something like, Exchange online, but not have everything online yet. So, really that's an assessment to be done with the customer. I think some of the easiest ways is to take advantage of some of those free items, especially if you are well versed into your M365 journey already.
So let's talk extensibility for a moment. A lot of the data that drives Viva comes from inside the Microsoft 365 bubble, right? Especially those things that are sort of signal driven, topics and things that, you should look at this or you were involved with that or whatnot. That's all graph driven stuff, right, behind the scenes. What about those organizations, for example, some of Paul's customers that are more Salesforce centric, or maybe they work with other collaboration tools? Some of the customers that Jason would work with that probably have massive data lakes, or what are we calling them now, Jason? Data lake, house, condos, whatever.
I'm pretty sure it's just ocean liners at this point. We're just gonna call it
okay, all right. So we're back to really big, slow moving things. All right, got it. But let's say the majority of the organization data and signals that they're generating comes from other products and tools feeding into these massive warehouses that Jason's team is trying to help surface and allow people to work with. How can you drive that experience when most of your data is outside of the 365 bubble?
So I'm going to speak specifically from a connections experience for this. And there's extensibility in every product. I just don't know it as well as I do the connections experience, but there are lots and lots of partnerships for Viva Connections to be able to create those ACE cards for productivity moving forward. And so a lot of those third-party types of solutions we have been working with in conjunction with those third-party partners to be able to bring all of those elements right into working with those cards right in Viva Connections. So typical user will click on a card, and that card might show, their payroll information or their pay stub type of information. Because we have the ability to create those ACE cards and then put them into that layer and ACE cards are not just in Viva Connections. There's ACE cards other places, but working with them in Viva Connections brings that, at that point of first entry for those customers. And so it doesn't really matter if you have other HR systems, if you have other, types of third-party products. Yeah, we're welcoming the third-party experiences and bringing those in to be able to use those with those partnerships that we have created.
So is there part of the whole Viva ecosystem, is there an ISV opportunity here where, for
Absolutely.
example, I'll take a very common scenario that Paul will relate to. Teams is my primary pane of glass, right, for communicating with my organization, because that's our collaboration stack. But all of my business activity happens in Salesforce, right? Everything is driven out of that separate construct. Right. If I can't see both at the same time, I'm constantly context switching back and forth and flipping. Right. I need Salesforce metrics and information and signals to drive my communication with other people on my team. That's obviously not, and there wouldn't be an expectation that Microsoft is going to deliver a first-party solution to that because it's outside of their space, right? But is that a place where ISVs could step in and say, "Here, we would offer a blended experience here that surfaces inside of this, as long as they could." I know that stuff is available in the REST APIs for Salesforce, so there's opportunity there for ISVs.
Yes, absolutely. Either creating those cards, publishing those cards, creating those ways that we can get to that source of information. We're working with several ISVs.
So, Paul, am I on the right track here in saying that that's a common use case that customers would have? They need to bring all that data sort of into actionable stuff into a single pane of glass?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was going over this fairly recently, and it has to do with culture. It's trying to send the data where your community is, and whether you live off of Teams, whether you live off of Slack, whether you live off of LinkedIn, trying to get that information to where your people are living and into their daily life, so they're not interrupted. They're not having to choose to come over and have noise or wade through noise. But also, and you said over personalized, and one of the to come back to that, one of the things that makes the new channels more fun when you get and you bring new stuff up, because they are removed by the integration cycle of being over broadcast. So email was amazing when you got a couple of emails a day and you read them and you acted on them. And now that you've got 10,000 of them, email's terrible. I use Teams, I use a chat. And now so much stuff is happening and chats become terrible. And we're wishing we could go back. Well, let's go back to websites where I don't get flooded with messages and I only get it whenever. Well, now even that's turned into the fire hose. So it seems like everything is it's popular until it gets too popular. And we saturate the channel, and we're not learning to dial that down to the right amount and put the right information in the right context. Hey, when I'm in Teams, I should be only open to these small bite messages. When I'm starting my day or ending my day on another channel, I can consume these bigger things, and I don't want to get overwhelmed with things that require long engagements. So yes, and then learning those moments of where you are in your day and what channels you're ready to consume things from what context is a big deal for shaping and getting the right message consumption and information processing.
So Jason, is there an opportunity here I've seen some of the dashboards that you and John do in your workshops where you've got a bunch of data and you've got what sort of kind of make me think of cards in your dashboard view, right? You've got some small snippets that you can dig down into. Is that a potential interface for boiling down some really complex data sets into small bits of information that then people who want more details could say, click on a card and go into a Power BI dashboard to do even further drilling down? Or is that just not the kind of crossover that would work in this context?
No, it absolutely can work. It's just a matter of, the right linking and things like that. I mean, the kind of thing you're talking about, like we can expose Power BI reports in a Teams window, the integration is there, and like even in some of the interactive chat type of stuff like that. All of those kinds of things are accessible and available. It's just a matter of you have to craft it, and it's not a native experience today. To Liz's point, there's some private preview things that they're working on that hopefully will give you that type of a leveraged experience where maybe there's a button that you say, hey, I want to see more information about X, and then it takes you back to that Power BI report in the same context. But all of that stuff requires work to be done, and as we know, especially when it comes to intranet type of mentality things like the Viva Suite, people want a single click. They just want to go. I want a clicky, and then I just want to get to it. So give it to me. This as a package thing. That's not there today. So yeah, we can visualize pretty much anything with data in the Power BI world. It's just a matter of having it in the right format and things like that. So so I don't think I gave you the answer you were looking for, but I gave you the answer that's real.
Well, I'm struggling myself, and being in a very small organization, so I can't imagine what it is like in a big organization. But I've talked with customers, or kind of seen how they work. That we're still doing this silos of activity. So I want to know what's on the corporate intranet, right? Well, it sort of gets pushed on me because as soon as I open my browser, bang, there it is. Okay, there's my corporate intranet stuff, right? And I think maybe that's being supplanted by some of these personalized engagement experiences. But then I want to go get some data. All right, now where am I going to go? Is there a team that I'm going to need to go look into for the project? Do I need to go into Power BI, right, and start looking for some different things? Where are my reports that I did over here? We still seem to be have these places where we do these things, and it's kind of unclear what happens where. I think we're still missing that. Here's my single point of engagement, and I can kind of get to everything. It seems like they're trying to make teams into that. We always start and end in teams for everything that we do. So sure, that's the right interface for that, but it seems that's where we're going. So I guess my larger point is, if we can't surface our external data, our data-driven activities like Power BI reports and stuff, if we can't get our regular communication type of things that Paul's talking about, if we can't bring it all together in one place, it kind of seems like just more noise and more just stuff happening that I'm just like, I can't deal with it.
So I think that the goal of it is that Teams is that interface, and each one of these things is simply a module therein, right? And it's not in your face as much. I'll be perfectly blunt. I don't go into the Viva world very often. I live in my world. When I have to, go in to do the required learning stuff that, I just had to do it at the end of the year. We do all these security trainings and different things like that. The standard corporate IT, what is phishing, all of that type of stuff. They try to make it more engaging and more interesting than that. That's basically what it boils down to. In order to do that, I had to use the Viva learning module, right? So that's in Teams. It's all right there. Finding that there, you can pop it out to a web browser-based experience, but the goal of it is that it's on the left rail in Teams. It's just under the three dots type of ellipsis mentality. Like you go find it, hey, there it is. And you get the emails that say, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z things. Like, okay, fine. So I click on it and it takes me into that experience. Well, Power BI as an app is right there as well. So all of the different things are all in, that Teams experience. That's where everything is being pushed to. Dynamics. When you go into Dynamics, all that's being done these days through Teams. Like you can go in, the sales module, all of that type of stuff. It's all in the same pane of glass. So to me, it's all there. It just, you don't have to jump out and do different things. Personally, I like multi-window. So I want that I have two monitors still. I'm one of those, even though one is a giant curved 34-inch monitor. I still have a sidecar monitor.
Half the room.
I want my email on a different screen. And I have my monitor carved up in the way that I want to visualize data. And I move it around throughout the day and move things into different spaces. But, the goal of it being that everything I can do, I should be able to do from my phone. everything I need to do, I should be able to do from Teams and get to it. But let's give it to you in multiple ways so you can get there as well. If I didn't have to use Teams during the course of a day, I'd probably be a happy person just as well and live in a web browser and do all of the things. And just use my phone instead for communication. But that's just my modality and how I prefer to see it. I miss the days of the intranet where I go out and I find things through that mentality. But that's a personal style thing. I'm a curmudgeon. So, and I fully acknowledge and admit to that. But I also adapt to the ways of what's required. So I go into the different Viva modules as I need to. So.
And I think it's really important to recognize that prior to this year of going into using Viva Learning to do your learnings, Jason, you'd have to know what the URL was to be able to go into that LMS system, because that wasn't on a SharePoint-centric type of system either. So it was, knowing where I had to go to, which, yes, there was a short link and all that type of stuff to go to Learn, and then being able to navigate through Learn and that type of stuff. Whereas now, hey, we're meeting you right from where you work. We've got Viva Insights that might say, hey, you have a 30-minute time slot today that we can meet you with your 30 minutes of this required training that you have. Would you like us to book this time for you? And it books the time on your calendar if you say yes to that. And then, hey, guess what? It pushes that learning right to you. So it's maybe just a one-click experience, and you open up your learning and you take your learning and then you're done. And so we've got a few different of those Viva experiences coming at you at different times to be able to help you be more productive. So, rather than going, oh, I should do my learning now. What's that URL again? Let me look it up. Do I have a link to it? Where is it? Oh yeah, it's this one. Okay. Maybe save a little bit of time, but I look at it more as, hey, it's not so much saving time, it's saving that stress of having to go to all those places to look as well.
So coming up, it's still a few months away. Sorry, Paul, go ahead.
Oh yeah, and I, as a fellow curmudgeon, and I have just the 49 widescreen and a 32 sitting above that, next to the laptop. So I'm the same way. I have my landscape. I want the 360. I'm ready for the integration of VR so that I can have my full surround data and be able to pivot in my chair and see everything and have it all on all at once. But I did slip into, and it was in Slack, so that I want to share this sublime of getting hints of information out there as blips of messages that you can choose to go follow up on, and or only request and do it from the same interface and not have to switch context all the time. So some more complex data requires you to hop out. But Jason, there is a calm that comes from not having to pivot and twitch so much throughout the day, and being able, and I think it's a big deal in all of them that all of our collaboration tools that get that balance right, that can keep you engaged and in channel and not make you do a whole lot of work to go get to the other things, are going to win, as long as we find that right balance of not oversaturating it and not making it to where this becomes another thing that I want out of the way so I can do my work. If you keep it to where, if your work is collaboration, you can get there. And I could feel my brain kind of decaffeinate a little bit whenever I didn't have to keep as many windows open. So I think there's a balance there. And I'll just say I changed and saw it, and I live back and forth. I'm much more in the team space now and living in my multi-window life. But there's benefits to the different ways you can structure it that sometimes end up tickling you in ways you don't expect.
So three of the four of us will be
tickle. So they're like I'm trying to make this so we're not quite so Microsoft fanboy centric, because it can easily go that route with two people here being on the payroll. But, from a from
So I didn't feel bad bringing the other ones in.
Yeah, I'll throw down my curmudgeonly side. There are times where the Viva stuff is depressing to me, because I realize just how much time I spend in meetings as a result of it, and don't block off the time. And when I look at it, it's like I categorize my meetings, and so it pushes to me and says, "Hey, here's all the stuff you've been doing."
And it creates that awareness.
Yeah. And
there's all the stuff you should have been doing.
Yeah. But that's the first step to change too. Imagine if you didn't know about that and you still continued that behavior, right? So
I think we know. We know in the back of our heads. It's just when it puts it there in front of you and you go, oh yeah.
Oh, and it's a bigger number than what we thought it was, right? So yeah.
So one final thought before we wrap up here, Liz, the three of the four of us will be in Germany in May. Of course, Paul, you're welcome to come join us and hang out in Dusseldorf. Highly recommend it.
Absolutely.
Good beer, great food. But you'll be talking about Viva there at the upcoming collaboration summit. So what's your topic and what are you hoping to get out of that particular event?
So my topic is on really, how to make a great adoption playbook for your organization. So talking about Viva in terms of all of the customer experiences that I've had with adopting not only Viva Connections, but hopefully I'll be able to share some examples on some of the other types of employee experience platform experiences that we have as well. And then I've also been asked to write an article. So I will be put into one of the articles that they have for their magazine that they push out as well. So I'll be writing an article on some of those things that I learned from working with Viva Connections over the last couple of years. So.
Cool. And Jason and I are just going to drink beer, I believe. Jason, we're not.
I'm
whiskey. Yes. I want in on that too.
Now, I know I'm doing a workshop there, and I think there's some other sessions and stuff like that. Plus, just sitting down, meeting with attendees. It's a great show. It's great engagement. It's a lot of fun. So I'm looking forward to it as always. And then having to jump back across the pond for another set of events. I don't get to spend quite as much time as I'd like in Germany this time, but
the busy season is coming. There's no doubt about it. So, well, this has been great, Liz. I want to thank you again for joining us this month. Really appreciate it. Great conversation. And so, with that, we'll just do our final outro here. And once again, thanking our sponsors and making sure that you are aware of. One thing I should mention this because we just released our first episode last week of Winging It, which is a new series from Rob Bogue and myself. Our initial topic was on enterprise content management. And so this will be a purely Microsoft 365 focused discussion. For the most part, trying to keep Rob and I on topic is harder than keeping probably the four of us on topic. But we do our best to stay within the rails in that particular one. So look for that. On our YouTube channel and on the podcast as well. And of course, I want to thank our sponsors, Aptogent. Be sure to check out the Bifocal show. Jason, you got a new show coming up, I would assume. So be sure to check that out. Link is there. You can get that on your favorite podcast.
We dropped a couple over the recording time for this week, but we always do. So
awesome. With our favorite, of course, Comfort Canadian coming to us from either far north of the border or from Hawaii, the little plugger.
He's getting ready to take off on some fun adventures here shortly. So who knows where he's going to be, but we'll definitely still be putting out podcasts. And January is a slow month in the Power BI world. No service and desktop release, but early February is going to be fun. Lots of good stuff coming. So.
All right. Excellent. We'll check that out. And then, Paul, you've got a meeting coming up for the developer group here in Dallas. I assume another person event?
Yep, we're diving into Genie, which is a new. It's hard to describe. I'm looking to have a better description, but it's kind of a graph-based interconnection between the multiple platforms, trying to bring a customer into a single pane of glass. Whenever you're pulling different products in and different systems in and pulling them together for a single perspective. So we've got a developer advocate, Danielle Larragee, is going to come talk to us about that at our next user group meeting on the 25th.
All right. That sounds good. And people can also join remotely.
Yes, we're still hybrid. Yep, you can hit it on Zoom or come out in person to UT Dallas, and we'll hang out there, eat some pizza, and chill.
Very cool. Excellent. Well, thank you, everyone. That's a wrap for us this month. Be sure to look for our next episode. Remember, third Thursdays of every month. And don't forget, we're now on all the major podcast platforms. So within usually 24 hours or so of this webcast going live, it'll be on Spotify and Apple Music and Google and Amazon and all the places you normally get your podcast. So as much as you love to see our beautiful faces, you can take us with you on the go and have us with you wherever you are. So great stuff. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you next month.
Thank you, Liz.